Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the death toll from this week's unrest in DR Congo continues to rise. Human Rights Watch claims that at least 44 people have been killed in clashes linked to protests over suspicions the president's trying to postpone elections. Also, protests break out in universities across South Africa over plans to allow them to raise student fees in 2017. Activists keep the pressure up on their call for free education for all. And conservationists in Kenya win a stop to construction of a railway that's meant to cut through Nairobi National Park. The project's aimed at boosting trade across East Africa, but activists say it will destroy an already fragile local ecosystem. First, Human Rights Watch claims that at least 44 people have been killed in crackdowns on anti-government protests in DR Congo. Critics of President Joseph Kabila accuse him of trying to delay November's elections to extend his stay in power. Amidst growing international concern, on Monday, France's president placed blame for the unrest squarely on the Congolese government.
We don't know how many people are dead, but what is certain is that there are victims and that these clashes were caused by abuses by the Congolese state itself. I want to repeat after condemning the violence that the constitution must be respected. The elections must take place, and we will see what kind of international supervision can be organized.
Well, that followed news that came out on Tuesday when opposition party headquarters were targeted in a second day of fatal clashes, and gunshots could be heard throughout the Congolese capital.
An eerie calm has descended on Kinshasa. Police patrol the almost empty streets after 2 days of violence. In the early hours of Tuesday, unknown attackers emptied jerry cans onto 3 opposition party headquarters, including the Union for Democracy and Social Progress, the largest opposition party in the National Assembly.
It happened from 2 till 4:30 a.m. with bullets, tear gas and gasoline. They burnt down almost everything. It was the Republican Guard, not the police.
2 charred bodies were discovered and several people were severely injured. The buildings of the other 2 opposition headquarters continued to smolder on Tuesday.
We really deplore this behavior. It's truly sad and shocking. It's not what we want, and it hurts.
On Monday, one of the DRC's main opposition leaders called for a nationwide protest to push the Electoral Commission to announce a date for the upcoming presidential election. Demonstrators also called for President Joseph Kabila to step down when his term ends on December 20th.
Well, talks aimed at settling a consensus between the government and Joseph Kabila's opponents have struggled to gain credibility amongst the opposition. On Tuesday, more participants left the table. Thomas Nicolon tells us more.
Since yesterday's clashes in Kinshasa, the Democratic Republic of Congo is more than ever in a political dead end. Today, the Catholic Church announced that it is walking out of talks in the national dialogue for 2 reasons. First, because the bishops say that they were moved by their brothers and sisters who lost their lives yesterday fighting for the Constitution. And second, because they want to make sure that Joseph Kabila will not run for president at the next presidential election. Now, on the opposition side, Martin Fayulu, who is one of the organizers of yesterday's march, told me that the only thing that can save this country now is an intervention from the international community. But at the government spokesman, Lambert Mende, told me that yesterday it was a real coup attempt by the opposition that failed in Kinshasa.
To South Africa now, where violent clashes between students and campus security broke out in the city's Wits University. This amidst a row over plans for a hike to tuition fees. The protest came a day after the government announced that universities could charge students up to 8% more in 2017.
The students wanted to enter Wits University in Johannesburg. When the police didn't let them, some protesters hurled rocks at the security forces. They are furious after the government said next year's tuition fees can increase by up to 8%, above the nation's inflation rate of 6%. Many say a rise in fees would further disadvantage black students who are already underrepresented at university.
We said we do not want a fee increment, so this is what we're doing today is just basically standing together and going with our word and going forward as to what is it that we want.
We are calling for free and quality education. We need the commission to be sped up, the terms of reference to change, not just from feasibility, but to how we're going to realize it, and we want timelines. When are we going to be implementing free and quality education?
The government said it could not afford free education for all students, but it promised to pay $180 million to cover the costs for the poorest ones. Last year, weeks of violent demonstrations forced President Jacob Zuma to rule out fee raises for this year. They were some of the biggest student protests since the end of white minority rule in 1994.
The Burundian government has denied that it's kept death lists of people to be eliminated amidst unrest caused by President Pierre Nkurunziza's controversial third mandate. UN investigators have been looking into allegations of torture and murder of government opponents and drawn up a list of suspects they want to see prosecuted for crimes against humanity. UN officials say that they verified 564 executions in Burundi since last April, when protests were first sparked by Pierre Nkurunziza's announcement that he planned to run again. Bujumbura says the report is biased and has denied all the allegations. After being refused entry to South Africa for his homophobic views, an American pastor has been ordered out of Botswana. Stephen Anderson has been declared a prohibited immigrant and was arrested by immigration officials at a radio station where he'd given an interview in which he called for a gay guest on the show to be killed. Anderson's also notorious for being a Holocaust denier and having said that he prayed for the death of US President Barack Obama. Homosexuality is illegal in Botswana. The government hasn't said why it's decided to deport Anderson. Turn now to Kenya, where construction of a railway line that was due to cut through Nairobi's National Park has been held up following protests in the capital. An environmental tribunal has blocked the project, which conservationists say threatened one of the country's oldest wildlife sanctuaries. Onka Ula tells us more.
A $13.8 billion African rail line came to a grinding halt as Kenya's National Environment Tribunal hit the brakes on the construction of part of the standard gauge railway network. The project has been mired in controversy for months because of the section which would cross through the Nairobi National Park. Conservationists say the project threatens the wildlife sanctuary and have appealed for the line to be rerouted.
Our voice is loud and clear. There is no way, as ordinary Kenyans, we will allow the standard gauge railway through Nairobi National Park. It is not negotiable, full stop.
The railway was planned to cross the entire 6-kilometer width of the park savanna on an elevated bridge so as not to disturb the flora and the fauna. But activists say that's not enough. It's part of a package of deals signed between Kenya and China in 2013 and will replace the colonial-era railway from Mombasa to Nairobi, cutting the trip down from 12 hours to 4. Eventually, the East Africa Railway Master Plan will link Mombasa with other African cities, like Kampala in Uganda and Juba in South Sudan. The court says developers have 3 weeks to respond with a feasibility study before the project can continue.
This year, more than 200 people have already died on Uganda's Kampala-Masaka highway, making it one of the deadliest roads in the world. While some locals put the dangers down to sorcery, police have turned their attention to drivers and are trying to get them to take their time on the treacherous pass.
The 130-kilometre highway connects the Ugandan capital to Tanzania, Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Dangerous driving, like overtaking into oncoming traffic, causes most of the crashes. Last month, 21 people died in a single accident here.
I was travelling with my wife and 7-year-old boy when the accident happened. My wife died on the spot. Our child is now living with relatives. Is still injured and needs treatment, but I can't provide anything since I'm still recovering. And I lost my job because I can't walk properly due to my injuries.
To try to prevent accidents, police have launched an operation codenamed Fiki Salama, meaning reach safely. Since the 11th of August, they've been checking drivers' licences and carrying out speed checks. They've also adopted a zero-tolerance approach to bribing, bringing perpetrators to court. With the constant threat of death, some have turned to God. Reverend Madad Birungi leads a group of Christians along the highway, blessing the road. He believes the presence of supernatural powers is the cause of the accidents.
A lot of witchcraft and a lot of sacrifice was done and the covenants made with these demonic powers that every month people die, they demand blood.
Witchcraft or not, with the rainy season about to begin, authorities are in a race against time to prevent a record number of road deaths this year.
That's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks very much for joining us. Please do so again if you can. Take care.
Revisited, presented by Stuart Norval.
On the 2nd of June 1982 in the Guatemalan village of Pambash, every male over the age of 14 was taken away by the army. Kidnapped and tortured, they were never seen again. Like many native communities in Guatemala, Pambash has suffered in silence. But the discovery in 2012 of the remains of hundreds of people has changed everything. Some of the few survivors have finally dared to speak out. After a 4-year investigation, 10 former high-level army officers have been put on trial. But one large piece of the puzzle is missing: the military archives, which the army still refuses to declassify 30 years later.
Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.